Well, I think it's probably very much what Carla is getting at. So both on the individual responsive requests we might ask just for shared perspective. One of the more dangerous things around sort of groupthink is that I hear Meyer didn't do it and Collins didn't do it and OCS didn't do it. Oh my goodness, why would we do it? That's not at all why we have those conversations. Right. We get the opposite call where they say, wow, you all didn't move on something. What was going on there? And we might say something they could never have known, like, well, we just did 3 grants in a row there, and our board just wanted to spread it out. And that's really interesting and useful perspective from a peer, because you get a lot more than a yes, no. You know, Meyer said no. Oh my goodness, is this a red flag? No, it's, you know, something very specific to Meyer. So that's the point. And then also I think more and more in Oregon and with folks that fund in Oregon, the funders are looking at the proactive, so the initiative level work to say, you know, we have really good, I think, working relationships with each other. And so we say on issues that we have in common, children's oral health issues, there's a group of funders that have just started meeting around it to say, well, we all together could do something kind of big in the state. So let's have this conversation, let's learn together. Early childhood under OCF's leadership is a great example of a learning community that has continued to meet and has actually formed such a strong sense of working together that there's collective funding happening around parenting work across the state. So it's another example of how those working together conversations actually lead to hopefully more ability to support your system-wide thinking. So the types of systems you're trying to build, the funders are also trying to do a similar thing and support it together.
Another question? Or maybe a comment too, David, about your funding.
Yes, thank you. David Porter with the U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA, Economic Development Administration. Shame on me for not bringing this up 3 years ago when I got here. It occurs to me that there's an interesting opportunity for you to collaborate with the feds and vice versa.
We can't hear you very well. But I don't think the microphone's on.
Is this on?
Oh, beautiful. There it is. Thank you.
I'm a soft-spoken, shy guy.
Okay. We still want to hear you, though.
So I'm with the Economic Development Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA. We are a granting agency. We do capital grants up to $2 million, $3 million in some cases. Part of a service area that includes 8 states. And we also do technical assistance grants. And I've been here about 3 years, and I'm sort of just thinking how ineffective of me not to have contacted you before, because our playing field is economic development, so I understand we don't do everything, but as an economic development person, so I have my bureaucratic guidelines for our grants. But as an economic development, community development person, I see many projects that come my way for that 2 things I would say. One, for the lack of a match. We have matching requirements, and it could be $20,000, $30,000 is all they need. Great projects don't get through our gate. So I should have probably called you and say, what do you think about this project? I think it's a great project. Can you help with a match? The other is projects which come my way that are not on our playing field, but a great project from community development. I could perhaps send it to you. Say, not our play, but maybe you can do something about it. The other, so I'm interested in some collaborations in that regard. We have a very strong staff in Seattle relative to construction projects, to capital projects. We have engineers and environmental people. So you have to have a really good capital project. So we're an interesting resource. If you have a capital project that has some economic development component, maybe it's something we could play with you as well, because you can be assured that if it gets a grant from us on a capital project, it's going to be, I mean, we even take security interest in the property for 20 years. That's how serious we are about it. The last piece I wanted to, so this is a plea for cooperation and collaboration opportunity. The EDA has in the past, with the current administration, has put out some extraordinary, $1 million program RFPs. The I-6 Challenge Grant, which we got in Oregon last year. But you have to, if you want $1 million, you have to come up with $1 million match. But that's $2 million in the community, and it only costs you half of that. So some very interesting opportunities. We have a couple more that are current on our website. This is not construction. This is $2.5 million for programs, just like statewide programs. So I would encourage you to go to the EDA website and say, is there a way for you to play in that, or it's a collaboration? Could is it a good enough project to be done in the state of Oregon that all of you could get together and put up, $250,000, because some of these people, they can't raise that kind of money, and so I'm just saying it'd be fun to collaborate on some of these things. And I can't speak for other feds, but we have collaborated with, because you can't use federal money to match federal money, by the way, but you can use federal money. I can use federal loan guarantee to match. So I can match my grant with a loan guarantee from the USDA, because it's not a grant. You see, it's actually an obligation of that. So it's actually you get the difference in those instruments. So I'm just saying we ought to be collaborating more often.
You have business cards?
I do.
Because I have one. We can trade. We love to pull in. I'm sure everyone here is the same.
Oh, yes.
We love to pull in federal dollars to this region to help.
I can only work with different lines.
Yeah.
But that's creativity, though.
Yeah.
They-
There's no
Right.
foundation that I'm almost aware of that isn't interested in leveraging more dollars into the community. We love to attract money into our community.
I realize this is a long way out, but I'm going to propose that in the next regards to rural, we have a funders panel of agencies,
Oh, yeah.
because very
Good idea.
there's a lot of resources there with the
They've done it.
the Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, the USDA Rural Development, and who else should we throw in there?
Innovation Fund,
I think RDI's done that.
CDFI Fund.
Another question? Let's see, is anybody else first before?
May I ask just a very basic question about grant writing?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Kathy Rains, my church started with a service agency in town in Halsey, Central Lynn area, a backpack program for school kids, and it's under the umbrella of the local food bank. I've never written a grant. I don't know anything about writing a grant, and two of the people affiliated with the food bank wrote a grant for funding, and I looked at it, and I come from a broadcast journalism background, so I write very simply, and this was not simple language. It was what they called grantees. And it wasn't to any of you funders. We didn't get the grant, but these were experienced grant writers. Do you really have to write using
No.
grantees?
No, you don't.
Okay.
We like short words.
Excuse me?
We like short words.
Okay. Because
Short
there were no short words in it, and I was appalled. And so, okay, thank you.
I just wanted to comment on what Linda was talking about. We just completed a community health assessment in Douglas County and talked to communities throughout the county. And not all are nonprofits, but we heard a lot about the lack of the economy of scale. We don't have the resources, the people to write those grants as you're talking about. It's usually organizations that don't have the skills, the staff time. So what you're doing, and I know that some of the others are doing that as well, is really important to help communities actually build that capacity. So thank you for that.
My question is specifically for Megan.
Okay, I'll look
A
alert.
number of years ago, I spoke with Kathleen Cornett about some opportunities for the organization that I volunteer with, which had already received 2 grants from Oregon Community Foundation, and she suggested a challenge grant that we would use to leverage local major donor contributions. And since that was several years ago, I was just wondering if that is still an opportunity.
Sure.
Oh.
Absolutely, you can request a challenge grant. I mean, most nonprofits don't. They'd just rather have the funding free and clear and do with it. But I think anyone here would say, yeah, if you can take our funding and leverage it to raise local dollars, we'd be just punch.
It was would be a contingent on raising the local money. Everything we raise locally would be matched by the Oregon Community Foundation. Okay. At the time that she suggested that, our board was not ready to do a major donor campaign, but we have in fact initiated one. So that's
Good
why
for
I
you.
asked that question.
Yeah, this leveraging can be really powerful. I just want a quick story. There was a group in Florence that my predecessor, the first director, gave $5,000 to for community leadership training. About 4 years later, they still had $1,000 left. Of course, it was all supposed to be spent the first year, but they were just kept drawing it on and kept finding other money and leveraging it, and they nursed that $5,000 for about 5 years.
That's what people in rural communities do exceptionally well.
That's what they really made it last. Another. Oh.
I was just going to ask your advice on startup nonprofits, because I know that organizational history is important in a grant, but sometimes it's better to start over than to go with what was. And so I'm contemplating that in our community here. And so just wondering what your advice would be for creating that organizational history for getting started as a new nonprofit in whatever area. I guess I don't really have a particular person to direct that to, but it's probably something that everybody can relate to.
Well, I can say for OCF's part, at least right now, we're funding fewer startups. There are a lot of existing nonprofits struggling to make a go of it, so we tend to lean in that direction. In general, though, recession aside, new nonprofits can be competitive, but to do that, they would, need to have really all those things that longstanding nonprofits have, that clarity of vision, board with really strong skills, broad skills, not just topical expertise, but, nonprofit expertise. That at least if your organization doesn't have history, that the people doing the work and managing the organization have a long history, that the organization's meeting a significant and important community need, that you have community support, all those things. So I don't know how the rest of you feel right now about funding newbies, but we've been doing a little less of that, but that's the kind of thing we'd be looking for.